Stop! That's private property. I yelled that as loud as my voice could go, but it was already too late. The excavator chewed into my family's old wooden bridge, my bridge like it was snapping bones. Diesel fume splinters flying, the sound of 100 years getting ripped apart. I'll never forget that. I swear in that moment something inside me broke along with it. They thought tearing down my bridge would teach me a lesson, but they had no idea they'd just set off a storm that was about to rain all over their fancy little HOA world. You hate HOA bullies, buckle up, because I'm about to show you what consequences really look like. It all started just a regular October morning, me out by the garden sweating in the cool air, adjusting fence posts. Then the rumble hit. Not traffic, something deeper, meaner. That kind of sound that crawls up your spine and tells you right away, this is trouble. I walked toward the creek, our family boundary with Maplewood Estates, and as I got closer I could see flashes of yellow behind the cottonwoods. Heavy machinery. My heart dropped. I dropped my hammer and ran, legs tangled in the brush, lungs burning. That noise just kept getting louder until I hit the creek bank and saw it all, the excavator already halfway through the bridge operator, sitting up there like he's the king of demolition, swinging the arm, tearing out the oak beams my grandfather set back in 1952. The machine didn't even hesitate, just chewed right through his careful joinery. I shouted, "Stop! You need to stop right now." But the operator just nodded toward some heavy-set guy in a reflective vest. Jake Miller, according to the name on his shirt, swaggered over like he'd done this 100 times. "You the owner?" he asks. "Yeah." "And you're destroying my bridge. This is private property." He barely even looked up from his clipboard. Work order from the HOA. Board voted for removal. Says your bridge is on our easement. He hands me this thick manila envelope with the HOA's gold seal full of forms and fancy words, photos, legal jargon, something about negatively impacting property values and violating community standards. "Man, this bridge has stood here 70 years, I tell him. Longer than Maplewood's even been a zip code. He just shrugs, points at the operator, and walks off. Next thing I know, the excavator goes to town on the main support beam. I can still hear the cracks sharp as a rifle shot. And suddenly I'm a kid again, my grandfather's calloused hand guiding mine across a mortise and tenon joint, telling me, "A bridge is about connection, Bobby. It brings people together." It did too. That bridge was a symbol after the war, built so neighbors could help each other across the creek. But the bulldozer didn't care. 7 decades gone in minutes, pride and family history sucked downstream like nothing. And then I heard the voice. "Some structures don't belong in a modern community." There she was, Margaret Hawthorne, HOA president. Silver hair, perfect navy blazer, documents all in order. The kind of person who can ruin your life with a polite smile. She tells me the board voted for this. It's a liability. What if a child gets hurt? Kids have been crossing that bridge safely for 50 years, I say. But she just points to the development, 200 houses on manicured lawns, her empire. I'm sure you understand. I didn't. I understood that they made this decision without me, without any care for the history, just because my bridge didn't fit their idea of perfection. So the last of the bridge falls. The operator packs up Jake, loads his tools. To them, just another item checked off. But they had no idea what they'd started. That night I just sat at my kitchen table, staring at the empty space where the bridge had stood. My hand rested on a chunk of the old railing, the wood still smooth from my grandfather's plane. And in that moment, all I felt was pure, hard-edged rage. By 3 in the morning, I'd made up my mind. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them a war using the only weapons that mattered: facts, paperwork, and every ounce of stubborn Harrison family grit. Down to the basement, I went flicking on the bare bulb over my grandfather's ancient filing cabinet. I dug through records, immigration papers, railroad stubs, tax bills, and then jackpot, the original property deed. Yellowed brittle, but the words were there, perpetual easement rights for the Harrison family, signed and sealed. I spent the next 3 days in the county records office, getting lost in a maze of boxes, working with Susan the clerk, who could find any file from the last 100 years if you asked nice enough. Turns out the developers of Maplewood never even filed the right paperwork for the access road. They just assumed it was public built their whole fancy entrance and guardhouse on my family's land. You know what I mean? Every car, school bus, delivery truck, 2 decades of trespassing right across my private road. That's when I called my old friend Charlie, now a property lawyer, and dumped the whole story on him. He goes quiet, then says, "Bobby, you're sitting on the legal equivalent of a nuclear bomb." All I wanted was respect, an apology, and a promise they wouldn't bulldoze my history again. But I'll admit, knowing I had that kind of leverage felt pretty damn good. I wrote the first letter to the HOA, kept it professional, attached the old deeds, pointed out their unauthorized road use, mailed it certified to Margaret herself. A week later, her reply shows up dismissive, condescending, basically calling my claim frivolous. But she clearly had no idea what I'd uncovered. So I escalated. Spread every document across my dining table, photographed it all, and ran the numbers $2 to $3 million worth of road usage over 20 years. I wasn't out to bankrupt my neighbors, but I wanted them to know I wasn't kidding. When the HOA's lawyers fired back with a cease and desist accusing me of harassment, I went down to the hardware store and put up a sign, "Private road Maplewood traffic by permission only, $50 per car per day, starting next month." Let's just say that got everyone's attention. Calls poured in. Most people were just scared and confused. But Tom Williams, a board member, actually listened. "We had no idea about the bridge until after the fact," he admitted. "I laid out my terms: apology, rebuild the bridge, formal easement, compensation for the road use." "That's fair," he said. But Margaret was still fighting tooth and nail, hiring private security, threatening lawsuits, trying to hold on to her little kingdom. By the time our story hit the news, me sitting in a lawn chair by the new gate drinking coffee while the morning commute backed up, public opinion had turned. Reporters loved the underdog angle. Social media ran wild. And in the middle of it, Margaret calls a press conference, digging herself even deeper by calling me a hostage taker on live TV. The community started to fracture. People wanted her out. Houses went up for sale. Even the board lawyer warned them they'd lose in court. Someone tried to vandalize my gate, left red spray paint in a mess, but all it did was hand me more evidence for the sheriff. Then Margaret doubled down, hiring private security to monitor my property. That backfired fast, turning the public even more against her. HOA reform groups picked up the story. Residents started a petition to remove Margaret, and Tom called an emergency meeting. Almost 200 people showed up, the biggest in Maplewood's history. Margaret called anyone who disagreed with her a traitor, threatened lawsuits, and tried to hold the whole neighborhood together by sheer force of will. But when her own lawyers filed to withdraw, citing irreconcilable differences and acknowledging my property rights in a footnote, the writing was on the wall. Margaret was done. The courtroom showdown was almost anticlimactic after everything we'd been through. Judge Reynolds cut through the nonsense, listened to Charlie walk through 100 years of deeds and maps, and asked Margaret's lawyer one simple question: "Did you have legal authority to destroy the bridge?" The answer, of course, was no. Judgment in my favor. Full vindication. Rebuild the bridge, formal apology, permanent easement, and Margaret barred from ever holding office again. 6 months later, I'm standing by the creek watching Tom and a crew of neighbors, some of whom never even knew my family, help rebuild the bridge. Kids learn how my grandfather marked the beams, how you can join past and future with nothing but wood, steel, and some hard-earned lessons. Even the County Historical Society got involved, calling it a landmark for how to handle conflict the right way. The bridge dedication turned into a community potluck. Judge Reynolds there, local press kids running across the new span. Someone asked me what I'd learned, and I told them justice isn't about crushing the other side. It's about making sure the rules are fair and everyone gets heard, even if you're just one person up against an entire HOA. My grandfather used to say a bridge was about connection. Turns out he was right. And you know what? That bridge is going to outlast all of us. And so will the lesson that you don't get to bulldoze people's history just because it doesn't fit your plans. Now, let me throw this out there for anyone listening. Who do you think was in the right? The family who built a bridge and kept it up for generations? Or the board that thought rules mattered more than people? Have you ever had to fight for what's yours against folks who think authority trumps everything else? Drop your story in the comments. Let's hear who you think got justice and what you'd do if it was your family's legacy on the line. And hey, subscribe, hit that bell, and stick around for the next wild story. Around here, you never know what the HOA is going to try next.